In the old days, blood tests were the privilege of elite athletes only, but now democratization is a wonderful thing and everyone can get their blood tested. So if you're starting out and looking to optimize, or you're a top level athlete looking for their peak performance, then this video is for you. If you take anabolic steroids or performance enhancing drugs, then this video is not for you, but the next one in the series is. I'm going to divide this topic into two videos because there's quite a lot to talk about. Firstly, I'll tell you about optimization for both men and women. In part 2, I'll go into detail on what happens when things go wrong or when you overdo it. Of course, if you're interested in this and other topics, then please do subscribe. It really does help me keep making videos. Thank you. Now let's start with part 1. Oh, but before we do, let me caveat something. Sports medicine research sucks. I mean, there's some great stuff out there, but it's often drowned out in a quagmire of total crap. Elite sport is about winning, and you don't win by telling everyone about what you've done. So if you found something that works, we're probably not going to know about it for a couple of years.
I am very, very sneaky, sir.
On top of that, athletes are freaks. I mean, they're not normal. And in medicine, you don't research outliers, you research the average. So much of the research is probably not applicable to you. And of course, because they're freaks, there aren't many of them, and sample sizes are again very small. That's bad research. And it's just as possible that because an athlete thinks something is working, it improves their performance, even though it doesn't really. That's like a sports placebo. I'm looking at you, altitude training, and we haven't even got into the world of Instagram, TikTok experts and PTs who aren't really educated in proper sports science. We're talking fads, talking diets, Viper masks, glucose monitors, and all kinds of misinformation and bullshit.
So thanks a latte, but no thanks a latte. You can take your coffee enema and shove it up your ass.
But you can trust me because I'm a YouTube doctor. Optimization. We talk a lot about that in sport, but what does it actually mean? Well, it's the theory of marginal gains. If you make every little thing as good as it can be, you'll see noticeable increases across the board. And at the very highest level, that's the difference between first and second. Every bit of optimization also helps other things optimize as well. So if you want your hormones to be good, you better make sure you're eating well, you're sleeping well, you're socializing well, and you're not overdoing your training. And here is lesson number 1. When it comes to sport, a one-off blood test is of limited use. Yeah, we can capture a snapshot of how things are, but for an athlete, it's all about your trends and what things are doing over time. And that doesn't just go for hormones, it goes for everything. Now, let's get a bit more specific. We'll start with men because, let's face it, men are simple.
Here's a story about a man, a simple man.
The main hormone we look at is testosterone. Testosterone is an anabolic hormone. That means it's involved in making things bigger, like building muscle, producing red blood cells to carry oxygen, increasing your bone density, repairing those micro tears you get after you exercise, and giving you that aggressive competitive drive. For peak performance, there's no set value, but you ideally want your testosterone to be in the normal range, and you want to feel like you're performing and recovering well. It's a myth that you need to have high levels of testosterone. Some athletes though, particularly young strength trainers, may have slightly higher levels of testosterone than the average man. Others may have levels towards the lower end of the normal range, but as long as your performance is still there, there's really no issue. However, if your level drops, particularly if you're an endurance athlete and you're noticing a drop off in your performance, it may be a sign of something called overtraining, which is what I'll talk about in part 2. If you're not an elite athlete and you're starting out, you may have some lowish levels of testosterone, which you can actually improve through sport and exercise.
Boosting it? How?
You start by taking an early morning testosterone test to find your baseline. Testosterone is highest in the mornings, and then it drops off over the course of the day. If your level is really low, then you've probably got a problem. But if your level is towards the low end of the normal range, you may be able to start boosting it naturally. Again, it's those key things. Sleep, sleep. I cannot emphasize sleep enough. It's probably the most important thing. Sleep well, and a good sleep hygiene with at least 7 hours of uninterrupted, glorious sleep per night. You'll recover better, you'll perform better, and so much more. You'll also want to eat well. Make sure you have good vitamin D levels. Cut out smoking. smoking, cut out drinking, and throw in some resistance training if you don't do that already, because that helps boost your testosterone levels too. There's a bit of evidence out there that suggests that strength training in the evening may boost your levels quicker than if you're working out in the morning, but it's really up to you. So men, easy, right? Now let's move on to women. In fairness, although testosterone levels are far lower in women, you still have it and it still has similar effects. So all those testosterone tips that you just skipped past, go back and watch it again. But what's also relevant is your menstrual cycle. Where men have testosterone, women have estrogen and progesterone. These two hormones help to balance your menstrual cycle and contribute to bone strength and recovery, so certainly influence your performance. Like most things in life, women were sidelined until relatively recently, and sport is no exception. Sorry about that. Female sports research is a shamefully young field, but on a positive note, it is beginning to come along nicely, and it's more nuanced than it is for men because men don't have menstrual cycles. Your menstrual cycle is divided into 3 phases: the follicular phase, or the first half, the luteal phase, or the second half, and in the middle, this little ovulatory phase when you release the egg from your ovaries. At the beginning of your menstrual cycle, you have a period, and it'll come as no surprise that the majority of athletes experience negative side effects as a result of this. Things like cramps, headaches, backache, bloating, these can all impact your performance. But you may also have issues with inflammation and general recovery. If you have heavy periods, you might also lose a lot of blood and iron, and we'll talk about that in part 2 because that can impact your performance. In the early follicular phase, your body is primed for high intensity workouts. Your pain tolerance is highest and your energy perception is high too. This is when you sprint. In the late follicular phase, it's been suggested that strength training is more effective. As you hit ovulation, a couple of studies have noticed increase in quadriceps power. So if you're into squatting, your PB, now is the time to do it. As you move into the luteal phase, it becomes harder to perform at high intensity, and in fact premenstrual syndrome, i.e. 7 to 10 days before your next period, can cause your performance to decline. Although this is normally a bit shit, recognizing that this is normal and expected might help you keep your motivation up. And what about contraception? Well, if you don't want all the hormone fluctuations, you could just stop your periods with the pill, for example. Well, about half of all female elite athletes use some form of contraception. And the only thing we know about that is that we don't really know about it and how to make recommendations on it because the research is ongoing. So that's sports hormones in a nutshell, and a teeny tiny bit of what goes into sports performance. Now, what happens when it all goes wrong? Well, join me in part 2 when I'll explain just that, and if you want to see part 2, you better subscribe to the channel because that's how you'll find out about it. So subscribe, like, ring the bell if you're super keen, and I'll see you next time. Take care, bye bye.